Part 1. First Contact Protocol. Commander Tae-ho stared at his control screens, his purple-scaled hands gripping the armrests of his command chair. Something was wrong, very wrong. The unknown ship floating in the darkness ahead looked like scrap metal held together with hope and stubbornness, but his instruments were screaming impossible readings. "Jin-woo, run those scans again," he ordered, his voice barely hiding his nervousness. The young officer's tentacles danced across his console, double-checking everything for the third time. "Sir, I've checked everything twice. The hull is primitive iron and steel alloy. Basic materials our ancestors stopped using 1,000 years. Gogo, but the power readings..." Jin-woo's voice cracked. "Commander, this thing is putting out more energy than our entire battle fleet combined." Tae-ho's three eyes blinked in sequence, a nervous habit from his youth. His people, the Corvani, had ruled the stars for centuries. They had gravity drives that could fold space, plasma weapons that could melt asteroids, and shields that could stop supernovas. Their technology was so advanced that most species they encountered were still playing with fire and sharp sticks. But this ship made no sense. "Ye-jin, any luck with communications?" he asked the spider-like communications officer. Her 8 arms moved in frustrated patterns across her equipment. "Nothing, Commander. I've tried every frequency, every protocol we know. Standard galactic greeting codes, mathematical sequences, even primitive radio waves. It's like talking to a dead rock." She paused, her multiple eyes focusing on her instruments. "But sir, the ship isn't dead. Something's definitely alive in there." Tae-ho stood up from his chair, his tall frame casting shadows across the dimly lit bridge. Through the main viewing screen, the mysterious vessel hung in space like a sleeping predator. Its hull was covered in scars and burn marks that told stories of violence. Strange protrusions stuck out at odd angles, and what looked like weapon ports dotted its surface like the eyes of some metal spider. "Analysis of the hull damage," he asked his science team. Officer Min-ho, a slug-like creature with brilliant analytical abilities, slithered closer to his station. "The scarring patterns are unusual, Commander. These aren't asteroid impacts or space debris damage. These are weapon strikes. Energy burns, projectile impacts, even what looks like explosive damage. This ship has been in serious combat." "With who?" Tae-ho wondered aloud. "There are no military conflicts in this sector. We've had peace here for over 200 years. "Sir," Ye-jin's voice cut through his thoughts. "I'm picking up automated signals from the vessel. It's broadcasting some kind of identification beacon, but the format is completely unknown. The language appears to be... Wait." Her arms froze over her controls. "Commander, I think I've found something in our linguistic databases, cross-referencing with ancient exploration records." The bridge fell silent except for the humming of their ship's systems. Every crew member watched as Ye-jin worked her magic with alien languages and communication protocols. "Got it," she announced suddenly. "The signal is in a language called English. According to our records, it belongs to a species from a small yellow star system, third planet. They call themselves humans." Tae-ho felt his blood turn cold. Humans. He'd heard whispers about them in the outer colonies. Strange stories that most people dismissed as spacer tales and drunk pilot gossip. Stories about a young species that had somehow weaponized everything they touched, who treated warfare like art and violence like science. "What's the message saying?" he asked quietly. Ye-jin's translation came through the bridge speakers in her nervous voice. "This is the Earth vessel Morning Star, registry number HSN 4477. We are on peaceful exploration mission. We come in friendship to all species. Please respond on emergency frequencies if assistance is needed." The words sounded friendly enough, but something about them made Tae-ho's skin crawl. Peaceful exploration. Then why did his sensors show enough? Weapon signatures to level a small moon. "Commander," Jin-woo called out urgently, "I'm reading massive power fluctuations from their ship. Whatever they're using for a power source, it's putting out energy signatures I've never seen before. It's like they're carrying a bottled star in there." Tae-ho made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Prepare a boarding. Shuttle. Small team only. Jin-woo, Min-ho, and 2 security officers. Full environmental suits and recording equipment. We need to know what we're dealing with. "Sir, is that wise?" Min-ho asked, his voice full of concern. If this species is as dangerous as the rumors suggest, that's exactly why we need to know, Taeho replied firmly. Better to understand them now than face them unprepared later. Besides, they claim to come in peace. As his crew prepared for the boarding mission, Taeho couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to make first contact with something far more dangerous than any species in their galactic records. The human ship drifted silently in space, waiting like a sleeping dragon, its weapons powered down but ready. None of them realized they were about to discover that humanity's idea of peaceful exploration involved enough firepower to crack planets. Part. The boarding Minho's hands shook as he sealed his environmental suit. As the ship's chief science officer, he'd boarded dozens of alien vessels over the years, but something about this human ship made his stomach twist with worry. The shuttle bay was unusually quiet as the boarding team made their final preparations. Remember, minimal contact, maximum observation, team leader Sung Min reminded them through the comm system. His voice carried the authority of someone who'd survived too many dangerous first contacts. We go in, we look around, we get out. No touching anything that looks important. The shuttle approached the human vessel slowly, like a small fish swimming toward a sleeping whale. Up close, the damage to the ship's hull was even more terrifying. Blast craters the size of buildings dotted the surface, yet the ship was still flying. Whatever had hit this thing should have turned it into floating debris, but here it was, intact and operational. Docking clamps engaged, announced their pilot, Jae Sung. Airlock is cycling. Atmosphere reads as, well, it's breathable, but I wouldn't recommend taking off your helmets. There's something strange about the air mixture. The moment Minho stepped through the airlock, his world changed forever. His boots hit the deck plates with a solid thunk that sent vibrations up through his legs. Normal gravity. Perfect, comfortable gravity that felt exactly like being on a planet's surface. This is impossible, he whispered into his comm, looking around frantically for gravity generators. On Corvani ships, the gravity systems were massive, complex machines that took up entire decks. Here, he saw nothing. The gravity just existed. Minho, you need to see this, Sung Min's voice crackled through the radio. The team leader was examining the corridor walls with his scanner, his expression hidden behind his helmet's visor, but his body language screaming confusion. The corridor stretched ahead of them like something from a nightmare, where Corvani ships were built with smooth, flowing lines and elegant curves. This human vessel looked like it had been designed by someone who expected to fight their way through hell. The walls were covered in thick, reinforced plating. Massive blast doors sat every 50 meters, ready to seal off sections of the ship in case of emergency. Look at these conduits, Minho said, running his scanner along the ceiling. Power cables, as thick as his arm, ran through armored channels, protected by layers of metal that could probably stop a direct hit from their shuttle's weapons. They've armored everything. Even the life support systems are protected, like they expect people to shoot at them. Security Officer Kyung-ho knelt beside what looked like a maintenance panel. These aren't maintenance access points, he said slowly. These are weapon storage compartments. There are rifles mounted behind these panels. They've got weapons everywhere. The air tasted strange through their suits' filters. It wasn't bad air exactly, but it carried hints of metal, ozone, and something else Minho couldn't identify. Something that spoke of machinery running at maximum capacity and people who lived their lives ready for war. The atmosphere composition is fascinating, Minho reported back to their ship. Oxygen levels are perfect for most species, but there are trace elements I don't recognize, chemical signatures that suggest, well, it's like they're breathing. Recycled battle smoke. They moved deeper into the ship, their footsteps echoing strangely in the corridors. Every surface seemed designed for function over form. There were no decorative elements, no artistic touches, no comfort features, just hard, practical engineering built to last through any disaster. Commander, Sung Min radioed back to their ship, this isn't a starship in any sense we understand. This is a mobile fortress. Everything here is built to military specifications, but it's not just military. It's like they expect to fight while they're exploring. The walls were covered in symbols and markings in the human language. Warning, signs, emergency procedures, and what looked like damage control instructions. Even their safety protocols seemed to assume that explosions and hull breaches were routine occurrences. "Minho, look at this," called out Engineer So-Jin, who had been examining the ship's internal structure. "These aren't just reinforced bulkheads, these are blast walls. Each section of this ship is designed to survive the complete destruction of every other section. They've built a ship that can lose half its mass and keep flying." The more they explored, the more unsettled the team became. This wasn't just a tough ship. This was a vessel designed by a species that had learned to expect the worst from the universe and had built accordingly. Every system had backups, every backup had backups. Every surface was scarred from use and repair, telling stories of damage and survival that would have destroyed any other vessel they knew. "The humans," Minho whispered to himself, understanding beginning to dawn. "They don't just travel through space, they fight their way through it." The corridor ahead split into multiple directions, each path leading deeper into the human vessel. Warning lights flickered along the walls, casting red shadows that made everything look like the inside of some great sleeping beast. None of them realized they were walking through what humans considered a lightly equipped exploration vessel. Part 3. The Arsenal Engineer. So Young had seen weapons before. Every Corvani ship carried defensive plasma cannons and energy shields for protection against pirates and space debris, but when the boarding team found the human weapons bay, she nearly vomited inside her helmet. The rooms stretched out before them like a cathedral of destruction. Row after row of massive metal tubes lined the walls, each one bigger than the main gun on their exploration vessel. These weren't the elegant energy weapons her people used. These were crude, brutal machines that looked like they belonged in some ancient factory, not on a spaceship. "What are those things?" whispered Technician Jamin, his voice barely audible through the comm system. Minho approached one of the weapons, his scanner beeping frantically as it tried to analyze what it was seeing. "According to my readings, these are kinetic accelerators, railguns. They use magnetic fields to fire solid projectiles at incredible speeds." He paused, checking his scanner again. "But the velocity readings, this can't be right. These things fire chunks of metal at nearly the speed of light." So Young felt her knees go weak. "Sir, do you understand what that means? A piece of metal, moving that fast would punch through our ship's shields like they weren't even there. It would go straight through our hull, through the other side, and keep going until it hit something big enough to stop it." She moved closer to examine the ammunition storage system. Massive shells, each one as long as her arm, sat in automated loading systems. The metal looked different from anything she'd seen before. Dense, heavy, and marked with symbols that made her translation device struggle. "Depleted uranium," she read aloud, her voice shaking. "They're firing depleted uranium shells. That's radioactive waste turned into ammunition. What kind of species weaponizes their nuclear waste?" But the railguns weren't even the worst part. As the team moved deeper into the weapons bay, they discovered something that made So Young's blood freeze in her veins. Missile pods, hundreds of them. Each pod contained dozens of warheads, and each warhead was marked with radiation warning symbols that glowed ominously in the dim light. "Jamin, help me translate these yield ratings," she called out, her voice cracking with fear. The technician joined her beside one of the missile storage units, his own scanner working overtime, to decode the human markings. 50 megatons, he read slowly. 100 megatons, 200... His voice trailed off as the numbers got bigger. "So Young, some of these warheads are rated at over 1,000 megatons. That's not a weapon, that's a geological event. One of these missiles could crack a small moon." The loading systems were automated, designed to fire multiple missiles simultaneously. Launch tubes fed directly from the storage bays, meaning the humans could fire their entire nuclear arsenal in a matter of minutes. The targeting computers were sophisticated beyond anything the Corvani had ever built, capable of tracking thousands of targets at once across entire star systems. "This single bay has enough firepower to sterilize every inhabited world in our home sector," So Young reported back to their ship, her voice barely steady. "Commander, they've got enough nuclear weapons here to glass entire continents. This isn't a ship's armament. This is a mobile apocalypse." Team leader Sung Min discovered the most terrifying aspect of the human weapons systems. They weren't just powerful. They were designed to be used together. Fire control systems linked the railguns, missiles, and energy weapons into a coordinated network. The humans didn't just shoot at their enemies, they deleted them from existence with mathematical precision. "Look at this tactical display," he called the others over to a wall-mounted screen. "This ship's computer can calculate firing solutions for planetary bombardment. It's got targeting data for surface installations, orbital platforms, even moving fleets. They've turned warfare into a science." Jamin found the ammunition storage deep in the ship's belly. Warehouse-sized compartments filled with shells, missiles, energy cells, and replacement parts. "They have enough ordnance here to fight a 20-year war," he reported, his voice full of disbelief. "What kind of species arms an exploration vessel like this?" The maintenance logs told an even more disturbing story. The weapons weren't just for show, they'd been fired. Recently, target practice records showed the crew regularly tested their systems on asteroids, space debris, and something called hostile contacts. The humans didn't just carry weapons, they used them. "Sir," So Young called out, examining a damage control station, "these systems are designed for combat repair. They can fix battle damage while fighting. The humans expect to take hits and keep shooting." Emergency protocols posted on the walls outlined procedures for various combat scenarios. Hull breaches, reactor damage, crew casualties, even complete weapons system failures. Each procedure ended with the same instruction: continue mission. Objectives: maintain fire superiority. The most chilling discovery came when Minho accessed the weapons control computer. The system's default setting wasn't safety lock or defensive mode. It was set to free fire authorization. The humans flew through space with their weapons ready to shoot anything that looked threatening. "This isn't a science vessel," So Young whispered, finally understanding the truth. "This is a warship disguised as an exploration craft. They've taken enough firepower to conquer a small empire and called it standard defensive armament." As the boarding team prepared to leave the weapons bay, none of them noticed the small notation in the corner of the tactical display: light cruiser classification, exploration variant. What they were looking at wasn't even a proper warship. It was what humans considered lightly armed. Part 4. The Crew Quarters. Cultural analyst Hyo Jin had studied dozens of alien species throughout her career. She prided herself on understanding how different cultures lived, worked, and thought. But as she explored the human crew quarters, everything she thought she knew about civilized behavior began to crumble. The personal living spaces were small but efficiently designed, each one telling a story about its occupant. What terrified Hyo Jin wasn't what she found, but how normal it all seemed to the humans who lived here. These people had taken violence and turned it into casual entertainment. "Minho, you need to see this," she called, her voice tight with disbelief. She was standing in front of a personal entertainment terminal, watching something that made her stomach turn. The screen showed humans engaged in brutal combat simulations, fighting wars that never happened, destroying cities that never existed. "They call these games," she explained as Minho joined her. "Look at the categories: military strategy, combat simulation, warfare tactics, survival horror. Their idea of fun is practicing how to kill more efficiently." The entertainment library contained thousands of titles, each one more violent than the last. Humans seemed to enjoy watching simulated battles, reading about fictional wars, and playing games where the objective was always the same: eliminate the enemy completely. Their recreational time was spent learning new ways to fight, but it was the exercise equipment that truly horrified her. In one corner of the recreation area sat machines that looked like medieval torture devices, metal frames with weights and pulleys designed to stress the human body to its breaking point. "They call this working out," she read from the equipment manual. "Physical conditioning through systematic stress application. The goal is to damage muscle tissue so it repairs itself stronger." She looked at Minho with wide eyes. "They literally torture themselves for fun." The personal logs were even more disturbing. These weren't the writings of hardened soldiers or career warriors. These were ordinary people: teachers, engineers, scientists, medical staff, people who should have been focused on learning and exploration, not combat readiness. One log entry from Engineer Park caught her attention. Finished installing the new targeting system today. Should improve our accuracy by 12%. Looking. Forward to testing it on those pirates we've been tracking. Another entry from Medical Officer Kim was even worse. Treated 3 crew members for exercise injuries today. Broken bones, torn muscles, exhaustion. They push themselves harder than any species I've studied. It's like they're constantly preparing for war. But it was Captain Lee's personal logs that truly chilled her to the bone. She accessed his private files, expecting to find the thoughts of a military commander. Instead, she found the casual observations of someone who treated violence as a routine part of daily life. Day 47 of our exploration mission, one entry read. Another peaceful day in the void. Only had to show the flag twice this week. The local pirates tried to intercept one of our supply convoys, but a few warning shots convinced them to find easier targets. Word is spreading that human shipping lanes are off limits. Good, saves ammunition. The captain wrote about violence the way Hyojin's people wrote about weather. Casual, routine, unremarkable. He mentioned acceptable casualties and necessary force multipliers, like they were grocery shopping lists. These humans didn't just accept violence as part of life. They had systematized it, optimized it, made it efficient. Personal belongings, scattered throughout the quarters, told their own stories. Books about military history, weapons manuals disguised as technical reading, and what appeared to be recreational combat gear. Even their clothing was designed for function over comfort, with hidden pockets for tools that could double as weapons. Look at their educational materials, Minho said, examining a personal tablet left on someone's bunk. Advanced physics, engineering, medicine, but it's all applied to combat situations. They learn science by figuring out how to make better weapons. The most disturbing discovery was in the ship's library database. Thousands of years of human history, culture, and literature, all of it soaked in violence. Their greatest heroes were warriors. Their most celebrated achievements were military victories. Their art celebrated battle. Their music sang of war. And their stories always ended with someone being defeated completely. This isn't a military crew, Hyojin realized with growing horror. These are civilians, ordinary people who think like soldiers, act like warriors, and treat violence like its normal daily routine. She found personal messages between crew members, casual conversations about combat tactics, mixed with discussions about family, friends, and hobbies back on Earth. They talked about destroying enemy ships the same way her people discussed gardening or cooking. One message particularly stood out. Hey Dongsu, remember that tactical problem from last week? I figured out a solution. If we modify the missile guidance systems and coordinate with the railgun targeting, we could take out an entire enemy fleet in under 30 seconds. Want to test it in the simulator after dinner? The response was equally casual. Sounds fun. I'll bring snacks. Maybe we can try that new planetary bombardment scenario too. These humans had weaponized everything, including their own minds. They didn't just carry tools of destruction. They thought like weapons, planned like weapons, and lived like weapons that happened to be shaped like people. Min-ho, Hyojin whispered. I don't think we're dealing with a military expedition. I think we've found a species that doesn't know the difference between peace and war. To them, it's all the same thing. As she continued reading through the personal files, one thing became terrifyingly clear. These humans weren't trying to be violent. This was just how they lived. Violence wasn't their profession, it was their culture. Part 5. The Engine Room. Chief Engineer Dong Hyun had built starship engines for 30 years. He'd worked with plasma fusion, gravity manipulation, and even experimental quantum drives. He thought he'd seen every possible way to power a spacecraft. Then he stepped into the human engine room and nearly collapsed from shock. The reactor core sat in the center of the chamber like a caged star, humming with barely contained fury. Antimatter and matter danced together in a reaction that should have been impossible to control, let alone use as a routine power source. The energy output readings on his scanner made no sense. This single reactor produced more power than the entire energy grid of his home planet. One shick, he whispered. To his assistant, his voice shaking. Do you understand what we're looking at? This is antimatter annihilation. They're riding a controlled supernova inside their ship. Warship, a young engineer fresh from the academy, stared at the reactor with wide eyes. His own scanner was beeping frantically, trying to process energy, readings that exceeded its maximum settings. Sir, according to my calculations, one containment failure would release enough energy to sterilize half this solar system. How is this thing not exploding? Dong-hyun moved closer to examine the containment systems, his professional curiosity overriding his terror. What he saw defied everything he knew about safe engineering practices. The magnetic containment fields were holding antimatter at temperatures that would make stars jealous, but the safety systems looked like they'd been designed by someone who thought explosions were a feature, not a bug. Look at these emergency protocols, he said, reading from a wall-mounted display. In case of containment failure, the system is designed to channel the explosion outward through the engine nozzles. They're planning to surf their own nuclear detonation if something goes wrong. The engineering logs were even more terrifying. The humans wrote about their reactor like it was a household appliance. Maintenance schedules, efficiency reports, and performance upgrades, all discussing technology that should have been theoretical at best. Listen to this, Warship said, reading from a personal log left by the human chief engineer. Day 847. Reactor performing within normal parameters. Increased antimatter flow by 3% to boost engine efficiency. Minor containment fluctuation during yesterday's combat maneuvers, but well within acceptable risk ranges. Note, remember to replace containment field generators next month. Acceptable risk ranges. They were casually managing a reaction that could destroy planets, and they called the occasional near explosion acceptable risk. The reactor had been running continuously for over 3 years without a major shutdown. Most antimatter systems Dong-hyun knew about required complete overhauls every few months, with teams of specialists and months of careful preparation. The humans did routine maintenance while the reactor was still active, like changing the oil in a ground vehicle. Sir, look at this maintenance schedule, Warship called out, examining a workstation covered in technical manuals. They perform repairs while the reactor is at full power. They have technicians working inches away from contained antimatter explosions. This isn't engineering. This is organized insanity. But the most shocking discovery was how efficient the whole system was. Despite looking like a disaster waiting to happen, the human reactor ran smoother and more reliably than the most advanced Corvani power systems. Their acceptable risk approach somehow produced better results than all the careful, conservative engineering his people had developed over centuries. The fuel storage area made Dong-hyun's knees weak. Tanks of antimatter, each one containing enough destructive potential to crack a moon, sat in neat rows like bottles in a cellar. The humans stored planet-killing amounts of fuel like it was heating oil for their homes. The fuel efficiency calculations are impossible, he reported to the boarding team. This ship can run at full power for decades without refueling. They've got enough antimatter stored here to power a small civilization, and they're using it to fly around space exploring. Emergency systems throughout the engine room told their own story. Blast doors that could seal off sections if the reactor went critical. Emergency venting systems to channel explosions safely away from the crew, and what appeared to be escape pods designed to outrun their own ship's destruction. They expect their engine to explode, Warship observed, studying the emergency procedures. All these safety systems aren't designed to prevent accidents. They're designed to let the crew survive when the reactor finally detonates. The automation systems were even more advanced than their weapons. The reactor could run itself, adjusting power output, managing fuel flow, and even performing minor repairs without human intervention. The humans had built an artificial intelligence smart enough to safely manage controlled stellar explosions. Look at these performance logs, Dong-hyun said, his voice filled with professional admiration despite his fear. They've been pushing this reactor beyond its design specifications for months, overloading it during combat, emergency power spikes, extreme acceleration burns. Any normal reactor would have failed catastrophically by now. The most disturbing entry in the engineering logs was almost casual in its implications. New antimatter refinement process is working well. We can now produce our own fuel using the ship's industrial fabricators. No longer dependent on external fuel sources, continuous operation now possible indefinitely. They weren't just carrying a controlled supernova, they could make more fuel whenever they needed it. The humans had turned their exploration vessel into a self-sufficient apocalypse machine that could operate for centuries without ever returning home. Warship, Dong-hyun whispered, finally understanding the full scope of what they were seeing. This isn't just advanced technology. This is impossible technology being used like it's routine. These humans have domesticated stellar engineering. They've taken the most dangerous forces in the universe and turned them into everyday tools. As they prepared to leave the engine room, one final detail caught Dong-hyun's attention, a small sign near the reactor core, written in simple human script. Caution, hot surface. The humans had labeled their controlled supernova like a kitchen appliance. Part 6. The Bridge. Navigation Officer Sunmi had analyzed command centers on hundreds of different ships throughout her career. Corviny bridges were elegant spaces filled with flowing curves and soft lighting, designed for contemplation and careful decision-making. The human bridge looked like it had been built inside a bunker. Every surface was armored. The command chairs were bolted to reinforced deck plates. Even the viewing screens were protected behind transparent barriers that could probably stop a direct hit from heavy weapons. This wasn't a place for peaceful exploration. This was a war room designed to keep functioning while everything around it exploded. With trembling fingers, she accessed the ship's command logs, expecting to find military records and battle plans. What she discovered was far more terrifying than any war journal. According to the official records, this vessel wasn't even a warship. The classification read Light Exploration Cruiser with standard defensive armament. Commander Tae-ho, she radioed back to their ship, her voice barely steady. If this is what humans consider lightly armed, what do their actual warships look like? The captain's personal logs painted a picture that made her blood run cold. Captain Lee wrote about his missions with the casual tone of someone discussing a routine job, but the details revealed something far more sinister than peaceful exploration. Day 23 of our diplomatic mission to the Vega colonies, one entry read. Made contact with the local mining consortium today. They seemed hesitant to accept our offer of protection services. A few demonstration shots from our railguns helped clarify the benefits of human partnership. They've agreed to sign the Mutual Defense Treaty. Sunmi read the entry 3 times, trying to understand what she was seeing. The humans called it diplomacy, but it sounded more like extortion with extra steps. They offered protection, demonstrated their weapons, and somehow always ended up with new allies who paid them tribute for defense services. Another log entry was even more revealing. Proceeding to Sector 7 for routine diplomatic contact. Intelligence reports suggest the locals have been interfering with our shipping lanes, taking the usual precautions, full weapons loadout, enhanced shields, and additional marine complement, hoping for a peaceful resolution, but prepared for standard enforcement procedures. The usual precautions for a diplomatic mission included enough firepower to level a city. Sunmi began to understand that when humans talked about peace, they meant the kind of peace that came from everyone being too terrified to fight back. The navigation records told an even more disturbing story. This single ship had visited over 40 star systems in the past year. Each visit followed the same pattern: initial contact, demonstration of capabilities, negotiation of protection agreements, and establishment of human oversight. The humans weren't exploring the galaxy. They were conquering it one diplomatic mission at a time. Look at these territorial maps, she called to Minho, who had joined her on the bridge. The star charts showed human influence spreading like an infection across this entire sector of space. Green zones marked human-protected space, yellow areas labeled under negotiation, and red regions designated as pending compliance. The most chilling discovery was in the ship's mission orders, filed directly from Earth Command. The language was bureaucratic and official, but the meaning was crystal clear. Expand human sphere of influence through peaceful means. Establish protection agreements with local populations. Ensure compliance with human shipping and trade regulations. Use appropriate force levels to maintain regional stability. Appropriate force levels. Sunmi checked the weapons manifest again. This ship carried enough destructive power to sterilize entire worlds, and Earth Command considered that appropriate for peaceful missions. "Minho, look at this communications log," she said, her voice shaking. "They're not just doing this on their own, this is coordinated. There are dozens of ships like this one, all following the same pattern, all expanding human control in different directions." The communications records showed regular contact with other exploration vessels, sharing information about problematic systems and enforcement success rates. The humans had turned galactic conquest into a science, with detailed reports on which species responded best to different types of pressure. One message between captains particularly stood out. Captain Park to Captain Lee. "Had great success in the Centauri region using the protective demonstration approach. Local pirates tried to interfere with our negotiations, so we used them as a live fire exercise. Very effective at convincing the planetary government to accept our terms. Highly recommend this technique for stubborn populations." The tactical displays showed something that made Sunmi's stomach drop. This wasn't just one ship operating alone. The humans had a network of vessels covering hundreds of light years, all coordinating their expansion efforts. Each ship knew where the others were, what they were doing, and how to support each other if things went wrong. "They've militarized exploration," she whispered, finally understanding the scope of what they were seeing. "Every human ship is a conquest vessel. They don't send diplomats followed by warships. They send warships that do diplomacy." The most terrifying entry in the captain's logs was almost casual in its implications. "Received updated orders from Earth Command. New exploration targets identified in the Orion sector. Intelligence suggests several pre-spaceflight civilizations that could benefit from human guidance. Mission timeline: establish contact within 6 months, protection agreements within 1 year, full integration within 5 years." The humans weren't just expanding their territory. They were actively seeking out weaker species to protect. It was conquest disguised as charity, invasion packaged as assistance. "Commander," Sunmi radioed back to their ship, her voice filled with urgency, "we need to leave now. This isn't first contact with an exploration vessel. We've stumbled onto an advanced scout for a species that's been quietly conquering this entire region of space." As she prepared to download the critical navigation data, one final detail caught her attention: a small notation in the corner of the main display. "Vessel classification: light cruiser. Exploration variant: minimal armament configuration." If this was minimal armament, she didn't want to imagine what human warships looked like when they were trying to be scary. Part 7. The Data Core. Intelligence Officer Kyung-soo had analyzed the histories of dozens of species throughout his career. Most civilizations followed predictable patterns: early tribal conflicts, gradual technological development, eventual spaceflight, and peaceful expansion into the galaxy. The human database he accessed told a completely different story, one that made him question everything he thought he knew about intelligent life. The data core sat in the heart of the ship, like a digital library of nightmares. Thousands of years of human history, all carefully catalogued and cross-referenced. Kyung-soo began with their early development, expecting to find the usual progression from primitive tools to advanced technology. What he found instead was a continuous arms race that had lasted for millennia. "Team leader Sung-min," he called through the comm system, his voice tight with disbelief. "You need to hear this. According to their historical records, humans have been at war for their entire recorded history. Not occasional conflicts or territorial disputes, continuous, systematic warfare for thousands of years. The early record showed a species that had weaponized everything they touched. Where other civilizations developed agriculture to feed their people, humans developed agriculture to support larger armies. Where others built cities for protection and community, humans built fortresses designed to withstand siege warfare. Every advancement in human civilization seemed designed around the assumption that someone was always trying to kill them. They turned their own planet into a weapons testing ground," he reported, his voice shaking as he read through military histories that spanned centuries. "Look at this. Nuclear warfare, biological weapons, chemical attacks. They didn't just develop these weapons. They used them. On themselves, on their own planet. The nuclear age particularly horrified him. Most species that discovered atomic energy used it for power generation and space exploration. Humans had immediately turned it into the most destructive weapons ever created, then built thousands of them, and pointed them at their own cities. For decades, they lived under the constant threat of complete self-annihilation, and somehow treated it as normal. "Minho, you need to see these medical records," Kyung-soo called to the science officer. Their entire medical system evolved from battlefield treatment, surgical techniques developed to fix combat injuries, pharmaceutical research focused on keeping soldiers fighting, prosthetic technology advanced to replace limbs lost in war. Even their greatest scientific achievements had violent origins. The same rockets that eventually carried them to space were originally designed as intercontinental death delivery systems. Their satellite networks began as military surveillance and communication systems. Their computer technology advanced because they needed better ways to calculate artillery trajectories and missile guidance. "This is impossible," Kyung-soo muttered to himself as he dug deeper into their technological development. Every major innovation in human history came from trying to kill each other more efficiently. Their medicine, engineering, manufacturing, communication, transportation, it's all militarized. The population statistics were equally disturbing. Throughout their history, humans had regularly reduced their own numbers through warfare, sometimes by tens of millions at a time. Wars that consumed entire continents, conflicts that lasted for decades, genocides that eliminated entire cultures. Yet somehow, they always recovered and came back stronger. They don't just survive warfare, he realized with growing horror. They thrive on it. Each major conflict pushed their technology forward by decades. They turned destruction into innovation. The cultural records were even more unsettling. Human art celebrated battle. Their literature glorified war heroes. Their entertainment focused on conflict and violence. Children grew up playing games that simulated combat, studying history that read like a catalogue of increasingly sophisticated ways to eliminate enemies. "Look at their educational system," he reported to the team. "They teach their children about famous battles, military strategies, and historical conflicts as core curriculum. Their heroes aren't artists or philosophers. They're generals and warriors who won important fights. But it was their recent history that truly terrified him. Instead of growing more peaceful as they advanced technologically, humans had become more efficient at violence. Their wars grew shorter but more devastating. Their weapons became more precise but more deadly. They had industrialized destruction the same way other species industrialized manufacturing. "Team, listen to this," Kyung-soo said, accessing their space colonization records. "When humans first left their planet, they didn't go exploring for knowledge or resources. They went looking for strategic advantages. Their first colonies were military outposts. Their first space stations were weapons, platforms. The database showed that human expansion into space followed the same pattern as their terrestrial conquests. They identified potential threats, secured strategic positions, and established defensive networks around everything they considered important. Their peaceful exploration missions always included detailed military assessments of every system. They visited. They've been preparing for interstellar warfare since before they met any other species," he reported, his voice filled with disbelief. "Look at these contingency plans. They have detailed strategies for fighting enemies they haven't even discovered yet. They plan military campaigns against hypothetical alien threats. The most disturbing discovery was in their psychological profiles. Humans didn't just accept violence as necessary, they had evolved to be good at it. Their brains were wired for tactical thinking, their bodies designed for endurance and adaptability, their society structured around competitive conflict that drove constant improvement." "This explains everything," Kyung-soo whispered. "The pieces finally coming together. They don't carry weapons because they're paranoid. They carry weapons because they're human. Violence isn't their profession. It's their nature." The historical database contained detailed analyses of every major conflict in human history, complete with tactical breakdowns, strategic assessments, and lessons learned. Humans didn't just fight wars. They studied them, improved upon them, and passed the knowledge down to future generations like a sacred tradition. Minho, we're not dealing with a species that happens to be good at warfare, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. We've found a species that has spent thousands of years perfecting the art of organized destruction. They've turned killing into a science, war into an industry, and conquest into exploration. As he prepared to extract the critical data, one final entry caught his attention, a recent addition to their historical database, filed under Contemporary Strategic Assessment. Galactic expansion proceeding ahead of schedule. Local species proving more cooperative than expected. Recommend maintaining current diplomatic approach while preparing standard enforcement protocols for resistant populations. The humans weren't just documenting their past, they were planning their future, and it looked exactly like their history. Systematic, efficient, and absolutely unstoppable. Part 8. The Revelation. Security Chief Yunji had broken into classified systems before, but never anything like this. The human-computer networks were protected by layers of encryption that would have stopped most military intelligence operations. But what she found buried in the deepest classified files made her wish she'd never tried to access them at all. Her scanner trembled in her hands as she read the mission documents marked with the highest security classifications. This wasn't an exploration vessel. It wasn't even a diplomatic mission. This ship was conducting military reconnaissance for something the humans called Expansion Phase 2. Team Leader Sungmin, she radioed, her voice barely controlled. I've found the real mission parameters. This ship isn't exploring. It's scouting. They're mapping every inhabited system, cataloging every species, and preparing detailed invasion plans. The files she accessed read like a textbook on galactic conquest. Human Command had divided the entire galaxy into strategic sectors, each one assigned to different reconnaissance fleets. This single ship was responsible for mapping over 200 star systems, identifying potential resistance points, and preparing the groundwork for what they casually referred to as integration operations. Listen to this mission briefing, she continued, reading from a document that made her blood freeze. Objective: complete strategic assessment of Sector 7 through peaceful contact protocols, document military capabilities, population centers, industrial capacity, and resource distribution of all encountered species. Prepare infrastructure reports for Phase 2 implementation. The humans had turned first contact into a science. Every friendly conversation, every diplomatic meeting, every cultural exchange was actually an intelligence-gathering operation. They smiled and shook hands while secretly cataloging weaknesses and planning invasions. But the most terrifying discovery was in the files about something called the Terra Defense Fleet. These weren't just military records. They were operational manuals for systematic galactic domination, written with the casual efficiency of people who had done this before. Standard protocols for uncooperative neighbors, she read aloud, her voice shaking. Phase 1. Diplomatic. Pressure through demonstration of superior firepower. Phase 2. Economic isolation and resource restriction. Phase 3. Direct military intervention with full-spectrum dominance objectives. The language was bureaucratic and clinical, but the Aigijam meaning was crystal clear. The humans had procedures for destroying any species that refused to submit to their authority. They'd turned genocide into paperwork, complete with forms to fill out and boxes to check. One document made her hands shake so badly she nearly dropped her scanner. Remember, we don't have enemies anymore. We have former enemies, current strategics. Doctrine assumes total victory in all conflict scenarios. Negotiation is preferred but not required. The humans didn't plan to coexist with other species. They planned to conquer everyone, and they'd already decided that anyone who resisted would simply cease to exist. They'd industrialized the complete annihilation of opposition and turned it into routine military procedure. Minho, you need to hear this tactical assessment, she called to the science officer. Current military doctrine assumes 90% casualty rates are acceptable for strategic objectives. All personnel have volunteered for extinction-level deployment scenarios. The humans didn't just accept massive losses in war, they planned for them, expected them. Every human on every ship had signed documents volunteering to die in operations that might kill nearly everyone involved. They'd turned suicide missions into standard operating procedure. The operational files revealed the true scope of human expansion. This wasn't one ship on one mission. There were hundreds of vessels like this one, all conducting the same type of reconnaissance, all preparing for the same coordinated offensive. The humans had been quietly mapping the entire galaxy for years, identifying every potential threat and opportunity. "Look at these resource allocation reports," Yunji said, accessing another classified file. "They're not just planning military operations, they're planning colonial administration, population management protocols, resource extraction schedules, infrastructure conversion timelines. They've already decided how they're going to run our worlds after they conquer them." The humans had detailed plans for what they called post-integration management. Every species would be assessed for usefulness, assigned specific roles in the human empire, and managed according to standardized procedures that read like livestock breeding manuals. Those deemed useful would be preserved as workers. Those considered problematic would be relocated to administrative zones. Those seen as threats would simply disappear. "This gets worse," she continued, finding personnel files that made her stomach turn. "Every human on these ships has been psychologically evaluated for what they call extinction tolerance. They only send people who can mentally handle the complete destruction of entire civilizations." The psychological profiles revealed that humans didn't just recruit soldiers for these missions. They recruited people who could watch worlds burn and sleep peacefully afterward. The crew of this ship weren't just explorers or warriors. They were professional exterminators, selected for their ability to eliminate entire species without emotional distress. "Team, we need to get out of here right now," she radioed urgently. "I found their communication protocols. This ship is scheduled to report back to Earth Command in 72 hours. If it doesn't, they'll send an investigation fleet to find out why." The emergency procedures were even more terrifying than the regular operations. If a reconnaissance ship was lost, human protocol called for the immediate deployment of a recovery fleet, armed with what they called area denial weapons. They wouldn't just investigate what happened to their missing ship. They would sterilize every system in the area to prevent their technology from falling into alien hands. "According to these files," Yunji continued, her voice filled with urgency, "losing a single reconnaissance vessel triggers automatic military response. They'll assume this entire sector is hostile and respond accordingly." The most chilling discovery was in the timeline documents. Phase 2 wasn't some distant future plan. It was scheduled to begin within the next galactic standard year. Hundreds of human fleets were already assembled and waiting for the reconnaissance phase to conclude. The galaxy was about to be invaded by a species that had spent decades preparing for systematic conquest. "This isn't first contact," Yunji realized with growing horror. "This is the final intelligence gathering before a coordinated invasion. We've found them just as they're preparing to conquer everything." As she copied the critical files to her portable storage device, one final document caught her attention. A personal message from Earth Command to all reconnaissance crews. "Phase 1 has exceeded all expectations. Local resistance minimal. Expansion proceeding ahead of schedule. Prepare for Phase 2 implementation. Remember, this is humanity's galaxy now. We're just giving everyone else time to accept it." The humans weren't coming to share the galaxy. They were coming to own it. Part 9. The Transmission. The boarding team was preparing to evacuate when communications specialist Yejin's equipment suddenly came alive with an incoming signal. She'd been monitoring human communication frequencies, hoping to learn more about their language and culture. What she intercepted instead was a routine message that changed everything they thought they knew about the galaxy's future. "Team Leader Sung Min," she called urgently. "I'm receiving a transmission meant for this ship. It's coming from Earth Command." The message was transmitted on a secure military frequency, but the human encryption was surprisingly easy to break. As Yejin decoded the signal, her tentacles froze over her equipment. The voice on the other end was casual, almost bored, like someone calling in a routine work order. "All exploration units, this is Earth Command Central. Return to Sol system immediately. Cancel all current missions and prepare for reassignment. The Centauri neighbors are getting ideas above their station again. Apparently they think our shipping taxes are unfair. Yejin felt her heart stop. The humans were talking about other species like they were misbehaving children who needed discipline. But the next part of the message made her blood turn to ice. Time to remind them why humans don't have neighbors. We have former neighbors. Standard pacification protocols are authorized. Repeat, standard pacification protocols are now in effect. Then the voice paused, and Yejin could hear papers rustling in the background. When the speaker continued, the casual tone made the words even more terrifying. Fleet Admiral Park sends his regards and wants to remind all exploration crews that excessive force is still excessive, even when it's authorized. Try to leave something standing for the cleanup crews. Earth Command out. The transmission ended with a soft click, leaving the boarding team in stunned silence. They'd just overheard what sounded like a routine military operation, but the implications were staggering. The humans were about to pacify an entire star system because of a tax dispute. Commander Taeho, Yejin radioed back to their ship, her voice shaking, "We need to leave. Right now. The humans just received orders to return home for a military operation. They're about to destroy the Centauri system." Back on their ship, Commander Taeho felt the universe shift around him. Everything clicked into place with horrible clarity. The weapons, the armor, the casual attitude toward violence. This wasn't a peaceful exploration vessel. This was a reconnaissance ship for a species that had already decided they owned the galaxy. "Emergency jump," he ordered, his voice cutting through the bridge like a blade. "All hands prepare for immediate departure. Get us out of here before they notice we've been aboard their ship." The crew moved with desperate efficiency, powering up their jump drives, while the boarding team raced back to their shuttle. Every second felt like an eternity as they waited for the human ship to detect their presence and respond with the kind of firepower they'd just discovered. "Jump drives online," reported his navigation officer. "Ready for emergency departure." "Do," Taeho commanded. "Maximum distance, random vector. Just get us away from here." As their ship disappeared into the folded space of faster-than-light travel, Taeho composed the most important message of his career. His hands shook as he recorded the transmission that would change galactic politics forever. Priority 1 message. "To the Galactic Council," he began, his voice steady despite his fear. "This is Commander Taeho of the Corvani Survey Fleet. I'm transmitting under emergency protocols with information critical to galactic security." He paused, trying to find words for what they'd discovered. "How do you explain that an entire species has been quietly preparing to conquer the galaxy? We have made contact with a species designation human from the Sol system. Recommend immediate non-aggression treaty negotiations. Alternative is extinction. These are not explorers or diplomats. They are harbingers of a systematic invasion force." The message continued with detailed reports of everything they'd found: the weapons, the reactor, the classified plans, and the casual brutality of a species that had turned galactic conquest into routine administration. "The humans are not seeking coexistence," he concluded. "They have already decided they own the galaxy. We are simply inhabitants they haven't processed yet. Recommend immediate diplomatic contact before they complete their expansion timeline." Meanwhile, the human ship continued its peaceful drift through space, completely unaware that their routine patrol had nearly triggered an interstellar incident. Deep in the ship's computer systems, automated programs continued their quiet work. Weapons maintenance cycles ran on schedule. Sensor sweeps monitored local space for potential threats. Targeting computers updated their firing solutions based on the latest tactical data. Captain Lee, sound asleep in his quarters, had no idea that his ship had been boarded and examined by terrified aliens. His dreams were peaceful, filled with thoughts of home, family, and the successful completion of another routine exploration mission. In the ship's armory, automated systems performed routine maintenance on weapons that could crack moons. In the engine room, barely contained antimatter hummed with patient power. In the navigation center, star charts marked the steady expansion of human space, one peaceful diplomatic mission at a time. The galaxy had just discovered that humanity's idea of peaceful exploration involved enough firepower to sterilize solar systems. But the humans themselves remained blissfully unaware that their neighbors had been taking notes, measuring their strength, and desperately trying to figure out how to survive what was coming. After all, when your science vessels can crack planets, and your diplomats carry world-ending weapons, negotiation really does become optional. The humans had built a civilization where overwhelming force was considered a reasonable starting point for any conversation. The universe was about to learn what that meant for everyone else.